The bell over the diner door chimed with a tired note as the last of the dinner crowd drifted out into the cooling night. Lena rolled her shoulders, easing the ache that always settled there by closing time, and wiped the counter in slow, practiced arcs. The air still held layers of smells: burnt sugar from creme brulee, hot oil, citrus from the cleaner she'd just sprayed. Somewhere in the back, a dishwasher clattered like distant rain. It was the hour when the place exhaled, when conversations softened and the lights seemed to dim on their own. That was when she noticed the phone. It lay beside a saucer smeared with espresso foam, face down, vibrating against the laminate with a nervous little hum. Not a local number, she could tell even before she turned it over. The country code glowed unfamiliar and sharp, the digits longer than she was used to seeing. Lena hesitated. Lost phones were common enough, tourists forgot them all the time. The rule was simple: bring it to the host stand, don't touch anything else. She reached for it anyway, intending to silence the buzz and move on. It didn't stop. The vibration came again, harder, as if the phone itself were pleading. Lena's thumb hovered. She thought of her grandmother's voice, how it used to cut through rooms and insist on being heard, and before she could talk herself out of it, she swiped to answer. "Hello," she said, already half prepared to apologize and hang up. A rush of sound flooded her ear, ragged breathing, words tumbling over one another in a language Lena hadn't spoken fluently in years but had never forgotten. Her spine straightened. She pressed the phone closer, the diner noise fading to a dull murmur as memory sharpened the syllables into meaning. The caller was frantic. He wasn't asking for someone, he was warning them. Names spilled out, dates, numbers. A meeting. Tonight. Papers that looked right but weren't. A signature that would bind someone to something irreversible. Slowly, Lena said, switching languages without thinking. Slowly. "Who is this?" The man on the other end exhaled like he'd been underwater. He repeated himself, clearer now, and a chill spread through her chest. He mentioned a client, no, the client, and the name landed with weight. Lena had heard it before, even if she pretended she hadn't. Everyone had. The foreign magnate whose investments propped up half the city, whose appearances were rumored but rarely confirmed. The billionaire CEO who ran the company hosting the private dinner in the back room tonight had built his empire with that man's trust. Lena's gaze lifted, almost against her will, to the glass-walled private dining area. Inside, men in tailored suits leaned over a table strewn with folders and crystal water glasses. The CEO sat at the head, silver at his temples, attention split between a lawyer whispering at his shoulder and the sleek tablet in front of him. The client wasn't there, he was abroad, but his representatives were, pens poised, ready. "Listen to me," the caller said urgently. They changed the route. The shell company, same name, different registration. If he signs, by morning the assets are frozen. He loses control. Tell them to stop, please. Lena's heart pounded so loudly she worried someone might hear it. This wasn't her place. She was a waitress with a tray tucked under her arm and a name stitched on her apron. She could already imagine the looks, security stepping in, the manager's tight smile, the quiet reprimand afterward. She glanced down at the phone again, at the foreign code glowing like a dare. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "Yes," the man said, almost sobbing with relief. "Numbers. Doc schedules. A phrase, only he uses it when he's angry. Please. They don't listen to me." Across the room, the owner's assistant, Mara, all sharp angles and faster heels, was arguing with a man Lena recognized from the business section of the news. The CEO's hand flicked in irritation, a small, controlled gesture that nonetheless stilled the table. Lena's fingers tightened around the phone. The call vibrated with urgency, and the diner felt suddenly too small, as if its walls were pressing in. She took a breath and stepped away from the counter. Each step toward the private room felt heavier than the last. Lena could feel eyes on her, Mara's first, narrowing with a warning that said not now, then the CEO's, cool and assessing. Lena stopped just short of the glass, raised her hand slightly, the universal sign for "excuse me." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I'm sorry," she said, switching back to English, pitching her words to cut through the low hum of conversation. "This call, he's trying to reach you. It's about the client." Mara moved first. "Miss, we're in the middle of. He says the documents are forged," Lena continued, heat flooding her cheeks. "The shipment route was changed. If you sign tonight." The CEO stood, chair legs scraping softly. His gaze fixed on her, sharp and unreadable. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lena," she said. "I work here." A flicker of disbelief crossed a lawyer's face. Another man scoffed under his breath. Lena swallowed and lifted the phone, switching languages again, letting the caller's words pour out through her. She translated as she listened, the old rhythms coming back, her grandmother's lessons guiding her tongue. Serial numbers. A port authority code. A phrase the client used when he was furious, a private joke turned password. The room shifted. The CEO's irritation gave way to something else, attention, honed and dangerous. He gestured for quiet, then for the phone. Lena hesitated only a second before handing it over. As he listened, his jaw tightened. He asked a question in halting phrases, then another, smoother this time. When he looked up, the room held its breath. Pause everything, he said quietly. Pens stopped midair. No signatures. Lena stepped back, legs trembling now that the moment had passed. The phone buzzed again as the call ended, and she set it gently on the table, as if it might shatter. Around her, men spoke in low, urgent tones. Mara stared at Lena like she was seeing her for the first time. From the doorway, the diner's bell chimed again, and life outside pressed in, ordinary and oblivious. Lena leaned against the wall, heart racing, wondering when answering a ringing phone had become the most important thing she'd ever done. For a moment after the CEO's command, no one moved. The silence felt brittle, like a glass held too tightly. Lena stood with her back to the wall, hands clasped in front of her apron, trying to slow her breathing as the private room filled with murmurs that swelled and dipped like a restless tide. The lawyers exchanged glances heavy with calculation, already rewinding the last 10 minutes in their heads, testing every assumption that had led them here. Someone reached for a phone, then thought better of it when the CEO's eyes flicked their way. Get compliance on the line, he said, voice low but absolute. And shipping. Now. Chairs scraped as aides moved. The man who had scoffed earlier avoided Lena's gaze. Mara hovered, torn between ushering Lena away and keeping her close, as if afraid the truth might evaporate if the messenger did. Lena felt the tremor in her legs settle into a hum. She was suddenly aware of the weight of the room, the polished table, the quiet art on the walls, the contracts whose margins held more money than she would see in a lifetime. The CEO gestured to Lena. Stay, he said, not unkindly. You understand the language better than we do. She nodded, stepping forward again, heart pounding anew. The speakerphone chimed as the foreign caller rejoined, his voice steadier now, buoyed by the knowledge that someone was listening. Lena translated in clean, careful sentences, resisting the urge to embellish or soften. Numbers spilled out, and she repeated them faithfully. A dock authority code drew a sharp intake of breath from one of the executives. A shipping manager on the line confirmed the reroute with a clipped, stunned reply. The pieces began to lock together with a sickening clarity. A second call came in, this one from the client's personal counsel abroad. The CEO took it, face going still as stone. He asked for verification, then for the phrase. When the lawyer spoke it, quiet and exact, the CEO closed his eyes for half a second. It was enough. Terminate negotiations, he said when he opened them. We're done tonight. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Phones rang. Messages flew. Lena found herself translating again, then clarifying, her voice threading through the noise. At some point someone pressed a glass of water into her hand. She took a sip and nearly laughed at the absurdity of it, her hands shaking around crystal while the fate of companies teetered. As the night deepened, the truth sharpened. The shell company, nearly indistinguishable from a legitimate partner, had been created to siphon assets through a jurisdiction designed to freeze them under the guise of regulatory review. By morning, the client would have woken to empty accounts and binding clauses he couldn't unwind. The room hummed with the relief of a narrowly avoided disaster and the adrenaline of betrayal exposed. When the final confirmation came through, shipping halted, signatures voided, authorities alerted, the CEO leaned back, exhaling. He looked at Lena, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. You recognized all that, he said. You translated it in real time. Lena shrugged, suddenly shy. My grandmother, she said. She made me practice. Said words are tools. You keep them sharp. A corner of his mouth lifted. She was right. Security escorted the remaining representatives out, polite and firm. The private room emptied until only the CEO, Mara, and Lena remained, the table still strewn with abandoned folders like shed skins. The noise from the diner seeped back in, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, a life that had kept going while this room spun. Take a break, Mara murmured, placing a hand on Lena's arm. I'll cover. Lena nodded and stepped out into the cool night air behind the building, letting it wash over her. She leaned against the brick, staring at the stars dulled by city light, the magnitude of what had almost happened pressing down on her chest. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number this time. She let it go to voicemail, not ready for another ring to change her life. When she returned inside, an hour had passed. The diner was nearly empty now, chairs stacked, floors mopped. Mara caught her eye and nodded toward the office. Lena wiped her hands on her apron and knocked. The CEO stood when she entered. Without the entourage, he looked almost ordinary, tired, thoughtful. He motioned for her to sit. "I won't keep you long," he said. "But I want to be clear." He thanked her. Not the polished gratitude of press releases, but something plain and sincere. He told her the client had called personally, voice tight with emotion, insisting on meeting the woman who'd answered a foreign call and trusted her instincts. He told her about the investigation already underway, the quiet work that would follow to ensure this never happened again. And, he added, folding his hands, "I don't believe in coincidences. You have a skill set we didn't know we needed." Lena listened, heart thudding, as he outlined an offer that sounded unreal: training in international liaison work, language certification, a role that would bridge worlds she'd only glimpsed from the margins. It wouldn't be handed to her, she'd have to earn it. But the door was open. She thought of her grandmother again, of the kitchen table and the patient corrections, of being told that listening was a form of courage. She thought of the phone buzzing on the counter, of choosing to answer. "I don't know anything about boardrooms," she said honestly. "You know about people," he replied. "We can teach the rest." The night ended quietly. Lena clocked out, stepped into the city's hum, and walked home with the offer letter folded carefully in her bag. Somewhere across an ocean, a client slept soundly, unaware of how close he'd come to ruin. Somewhere between the counter and the private room, Lena's life had bent onto a new path. When her phone rang again, this time a local number, she smiled before answering.